never give up. I never give up. I never give up.
Hi guys, welcome back to Neff Inspiration, my show on YouTube and as a podcast with me, your host, Stephan Neff. Another fantastic day for an interview. And today is going to be a cool interview. I've got Chris Glatis with me. Chris is a man who has experienced his first major anxiety attack shortly after getting into college. And anxiety is a bitch. We all know that. And, you know, some of us are overachievers. So is Chris. So he is not just a little bit of anxiety, but massive anxiety. And he has basically not just learned to live with it, but he is actually saying, you know what, guys, don't just run away from it. Actually, embrace it. Now, you could say, what a heap of bullshit. I actually completely share his opinion. So let's see how he argues about his take on life and take on anxiety. Chris, welcome to my show.
It's great to be here, man. I'm really excited about this interview.
Now, everyone in 2023 is anxious. Everyone is out there, and anxiety is running riot. And everyone nowadays seems to have a diagnosis of anxiety something. What does anxiety disorder for you mean? How did your first anxiety attack feel for you?
Yeah, that was a long time ago. And one thing I want to say really quickly is what you were saying, that everyone has it now. I think a lot of people probably didn't realize they might have had not necessarily, a disorder, right? Even in my book, I say, I call it disorder once, and then I call it a challenge, because I think labels are really important. Good. And they can affect the way you think about things. And, so, and I think, I do think, COVID, there's always all these things that happened recently that people are like, oh my God, I'm feeling like tightness in my chest, and I feel, sweaty palms and stuff they never felt before. And maybe it was under the radar for a while, and then something like COVID or something big happens in their life, and all of a sudden they realize that they have been struggling with some it just comes on all of a sudden. I think COVID was anxiety provoking for many people, just being locked up and cordoned off and on top of each other. And so, and there was a lot of fear of what we were dealing with. When I actually first experienced really what was a panic attack. And that was, I think my anxiety had been building. Like once that happened and once I got older, I could look back to see actually what transpired. I think that there was stuff that was building within me for a while. And when I graduated high school, we were at something that's called Beach Week, where everyone goes to the beach after their senior year in high school to celebrate, moving on, going to college. And I was sitting in the back of a car. We were driving from one location to another at the beach. And I just felt not only just this, it was more of an overwhelming kind of doom feeling. Physically, it was probably just a tightness in my chest, tingling. And I did everything I could just to push it down and, just act like everything was fine. Everyone in the car was having fun. I'm sure someone was drinking. I'm sure, we were going to a party. And I remember getting to the location, getting out of the car, and I just finally could breathe. And I was just like, what the F just happened? And that was my first experience. And I had no idea what it was at all. Nothing. Back in that time of day, there was really not a lot out there about anxiety. So it was really frightening.
Absolutely. And it's interesting that you say that you felt that things were building up prior to that with hindsight. How was that? Basically because of your efforts to get good grades at school? Was it because you were bullied? Was it because there were maybe adverse childhood experiences?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Now looking back, it was, I had my childhood was pretty intense. And I know my parents loved me. We had a good home, roof over our head. We had food. We had a lot of nice things. However, there was just emotionally, there was neglect that was going on. And my dad was traveling a lot. I never was really, really close to him, which unfortunately he passed away. And we never really got to get really close. So I think that my mother was an alcoholic. She also started abusing prescription drugs later in life. My sister struggled with things. So it was just a chaotic childhood. And I think that that was brewing underneath, and I wasn't really talking to anyone about it. And I think that one of the things with anxiety is if you stuff emotions, if you're feeling certain emotions and you're kind of trying to keep that down, it's like a pressure cooker. And so that just trying to keep that down creates anxiety. And then right before beach week, I had probably what I would say now is like some sort of depression. I mean, I was just, depression is really like no feeling. It's not feeling sad. It's not feeling happy. It's just kind of numb. And I was feeling that quite a bit before the end of high school. And so I really think it was a matter of all this stuff going on, and I wasn't telling anyone, and it was just living inside of me, brewing and brewing and brewing. That's really what I think, was the source.
And I love it how you describe it like a volcano erupting, because that's what it is. I often describe it as a big wave in the sea, and you're swimming and this wave is coming towards you. You see it and you might be angry about it, and you can shout at the wave and say, "I hate you, go away." And the wave just doesn't give a damn. It just comes. And but as with everything, the wave is coming, and it's your choice ultimately what you do. You can let the power of the wave pummel you and experience it, or you can just try to dive underneath it, can try to surf it, whatever it is. The surf will come. You like it or lump it, number one. But number two is also, after a certain time, it's gone. So that's a panic attack. So you've got a wave of neurochemicals washing over you, but then thereafter you come back down to a kind of level. And that level might be normal, or might be actually a raised level of anxiety. Now, certain things like raised level of anxiety that's part and parcel of PTSD. So I certainly had a very nasty gang assault when I was 13. My levels of anxiety were always much higher than maybe others. Did you have any specific incidences that you can pinpoint with hindsight, which raised your baseline of anxiety?
Yeah. Well, you brought up PTSD, and, that's something that I never really, I always thought when I was younger, or when I first started to understand anxiety a little bit more, that it was just a biochemical, something chemically going on in my brain. That's possible for some people, but when I started to get into therapy and really to start to explore my background and how I grew up, one person called it complex PTSD. With PTSD, it's like you have one major event that happens, like what happened to you. I'm so sorry that happened to you. Where complex PTSD is like, it might not be as intense, but it's there more often. It's just kind of there constantly. So, like I said about my mother, my dad was traveling around for work. My mother was drinking quite a bit. So I felt a responsibility in the house, being the man, to kind of almost take care of her, And so that was a huge responsibility, because she was out of control, And so, she was very sick. And so that happening quite a bit. I actually also was in a very serious car accident when I was late teens. I was very, very lucky. And I think that now looking at that, that's more of a PTSD event. Even though I was asleep when it happened, that it lives in your body. My body went through that, right? And not only did I almost kill myself, but 2 other people in the car. And I never, again, this is something that came up recently. I never really thought about that, but that's a massive trauma to the body, awake or not. So I would say, what was going on in my household, and then some of these other events. I never really got bullied. I definitely felt like an outsider. I definitely felt like a lone wolf a lot. And, that probably brought on a little sadness for me, and feeling, maybe feeling a little shame, or even feeling some anger. But I do think it was just the prolonged disconnect that was happening in the family, and which ultimately resulted in trauma. I know trauma is a big like a big buzzword now. But I do believe that, these things can live in the body. You can, write about it in the book. You can talk about it as much as you want, which is amazing. And it allows you to release that pressure a little bit. But for me, it felt like everything was from the neck up. And meanwhile, everything was staying fully entrenched down here. Right.
Isn't it?
And so, yeah.
No, so true. So true. And it's hard because I'm still swinging in my mind when I see statistics nowadays that 1 in 5 teenagers, female teenagers, has an established anxiety disorder. I just say, oh, for fuck's sake. I mean, everyone is now transgender, bi, everyone is anxiety, everyone, one side of me wants to be the hard ass. The other side of me actually says, well, hang on, there is so much going on in our lives. Are we finally actually accepting it? Are we finally actually putting a spotlight on those harder experiences that no doubt are necessary to create the person you are, but at the same token leave their mark often in some very nasty core beliefs and very nasty behaviors to actually deal with that. So I'm still floating back and forth, and there's kind of schizophrenia, 2 voices in my head there.
That's it. What's good about that is that you are hearing a lot more about it today, and what's good about that is that people are more vocal about it. I think that, when I moved from the East Coast to Los Angeles, there really wasn't a lot of people, at least on the East Coast. It was very much more buttoned up, on the East Coast, at least where I grew up. And I think one of the reasons I was drawn to Los Angeles was that it was very free as far as exploring who you are as a person, right? And different types of therapies and modalities that people were more open to talk about their issues. And so I think that nowadays, with the internet and social media, as bad as I think social media is, it also gives people the opportunity to come out and tell their truth, and have people like, oh, you know what, I'm going through that too. I'm going through that as well. And thank you for saying that. And so it's just, with the younger generation, I do think that they have the opportunity to get help that maybe didn't exist back then, or the stigma was much more, and I think the stigma for men is still there a little bit. I mean, I think that's one of the things my hope is that this book gets to a lot of men, because I think men will sit on things and suffer in silence, and just, I'm going to grit it out and tough it out, and that's bullshit,
Couldn't agree more, man. Boys don't cry. Yeah, my ass. But then again, we are our self-fulfilling prophecy here, because it is certainly in New Zealand here, it's a very masculine kind of world. The middle-aged kind of men like me, we're a man. We're a man's. We've got tractors, we've got hunting dogs, we go hunting. We drag our knuckles from now and then through the mud. And having said that, we have got, certainly here in our society, we've got the second highest youth suicide rate in the OECD. So, so it comes with a price, and increasingly the government as well as other organizations are recognizing them, and people are speaking out, and that is beautiful. So I actually agree 100% with you. We are blessed to a certain degree that there is more vocal acceptance out there. At the same token, We need to say, last week a study came out who said that teenagers who are spending more than 3 hours on their devices have got a significant raised level of anxiety. So are we not creating the problem with the internet, with the social media?
Yeah, it's a tool. Like, it's a tool, right? I mean, anything can be abused, into submission, So I think that, we wouldn't be able to talk right now if the internet didn't exist, right?
Touche, touche.
So I think that, but I'm not a big social media fan. I mean, I got more involved because of the book, but and I think that, when Facebook started connecting with people that you haven't seen in many, many years. But I think when you start getting into comparison and FOMO and looking at people's highlight reels, it can get you in a lot of trouble, especially, like you said, especially the younger set who are more malleable. Their brains are still forming. And so, so yeah, it can go either way. Social media could be, depending on what you're looking at, could really be helpful. You wake up and you look at an inspiring quote, or you go somewhere else and you see some guy that's, driving his Lamborghini around, and that's what you want, and you're comparing himself to him. So, yeah, it can be a double-edged sword. And I tell people, I even wrote about this in the book, like, just don't look at social media for a day and just check in to see how you feel. You feel, I feel so much better. It's like, it's interesting, the dopamine and all everything that's going on in your body that it's triggering, right? Yeah. If you get a like, it's like, oh my God, it's like this rush. So it can be very dangerous and create anxiety as well, definitely.
100%. For those of you listening or watching and have no clue what FOMO is, the fear of missing out, FOMO. Right. But there is also the opposite, JOMO. It's the joy of missing out. Actually, of you actually saying that today is a free day and I actually go into nature or do something else. So it doesn't need to be FOMO. It can be JOMO. And actually actively living a more intentional life. Because that's what we're coming down when we're talking about the ways how we can deal with raised levels of anxiety or panic attacks. That's where a lot of the resilience work then comes in. But I mean, so far you were on your spring break, you were on your beach week, you were basically petrified, mortified, doomed. How did that story continue? Typically, at some stage there, the alcohol comes in. Because the alcohol makes everything better, does it not?
Yeah. So I when I got into college, going back to the whole being, what it means to be a man, which is a big, that's a question I used to ask myself a lot and get the unbelievably wrong answers when I was younger, know. And so in college, I suffered in silence, and I did go to see a psychiatrist. And he told me, again, it was labels, but he said, look, you have this, there's medication for it. I was willing to do anything at that point, and did the medication. He also recommended me get involved in a group, like in a therapeutic group, which I didn't do because I was like, I just wanted to take the path of least resistance. And I didn't want to have to leave my dorm room and say, I'm going to a therapy group or, whatever it may be. So I hid it from my friends. I took the medication, which was very helpful at first. I mean, it was really when he told me, when he said, he kind of smiled. He goes, this is like, he's heard this a million times. Like, it made me feel good because I was like, I'm not the only one who has this. I'm not going crazy.
Brilliant.
And he was, he probably overprescribed me at that point in time, but, I took the medication. I just didn't tell anyone about it, which probably wasn't the greatest thing. I eventually got off medication before I went to graduate school, but then it kind of came roaring back because of what I said before. I hadn't done any of the internal work.
Exactly.
I just took the medication. I didn't do any internal work. So of course it's going to come back.
Sure.
And, I also, I come down pretty hard on medication in the book because I believe, in my opinion, that people are overprescribed. I think that some people do very well on medication, and it's amazing. Western medicine is unbelievable. I think that the some doctors, some psychiatrists use it as a first line of defense, when I think that it should be used as a Band-Aid to get people through a bad period of time, or if they're, really struggling. And of course, if they come off and it doesn't work, then they go on longer term. But I do believe there's people out there who probably could be living a life without medication. They've just never tried it. I actually got scared. What happens is you get frightened about what's going to happen if it's like a crutch. What's going to happen if I come off of it, right? I've been off of it for decades now, and there's definitely been a few times where I've been like, when my dad died and some other stuff that happened in my life, like I might need something, but I just did what felt right in the moment, which I talk about a lot in the book, was just sit with those feelings and let them process through your body.
Beautiful.
And it sounds so easy. It's the hardest fucking thing to do. But it's, if you let it metabolize out of your system, the next time it happens, it won't be as intense,
Oh, it's so beautifully said. We need, and that I think is something that we have completely forgotten to do. Was it more normal for our previous generations? I think it was, to actually more live through the emotions and feel them. There were not as many ways how to escape your reality in the past, to say one thing. And I think,
good point.
Exactly. So therefore that was there. And people didn't have the money to let's go back 200 years. The sugar was still a treat, not let's eat sweets. And nowadays, a little child that falls over, the very first thing that happens, mom shoves a lolly down their throat, and now they know, okay, I cried and I get sugar fix and I feel better. Hey, are we not laying down a really nice route towards the wrong thing, instead of mom just sitting down, spending the time and say, oh, sorry that it happened. Let's just sit here together and it will actually go away. Are we not teaching the wrong things because our generation has been taught the wrong things from very well-meaning the generation before? Because I strongly believe our parents never woke up in the morning and said, you know what, let's fuck up our children royally. And but rather they did their best that they could do with the knowledge and the experiences they had and the trauma they had. Was there much trauma? Sorry.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. That's a good point. I mean, I'm still trying to reckon with, I think I still have a lot of anger and resentment towards my family, towards my mother, and I'm really it's an everyday job. I mean, I'm trying to work on that because she's not going to be around that much longer, and I don't want her to go to the grave, not knowing me and not knowing what I felt I went through, but also to have some sort of proper relationship with her, if that's possible at this point, and the thrust of the book, because you just touched upon it, really is more about it's a tougher road. It's about sitting with things. It's about I tell people right up front in the book that this isn't, I'm not going to coddle you. I'm going to tell you that I still wake up on days where I'm like, I feel like it's 15 years ago. Like, I'm like, oh, I thought I already did work on this. I thought I already exercised this from my system. And I'm like, there it is again. And I say it sometimes it's just waiting for you to let your guard down. And I think that even though it's painful and even though it feels like your world is, coming crashing down on you, it will, if you can get through that, and not, you don't have to be alone. It could be through a therapist, a friend, whoever it is. if you can get through that, the resilience you will build and the richer life you will live, you don't even understand. You won't even understand it in the moment. And I'm sure you know that from this, from what you went through in your, going through your getting to sobriety. I'm happy that I didn't skip across the surface of life like a rock, right? I had to go through some really intense stuff. And look, I'll say, I'm also very, very privileged. I'm not over, fighting a war right now. Like we live, I live every day. I live a very good life. So when I say the struggle, sometimes you can't tell. Someone could have all the money in the world, the best, and they're having the toughest time of their life inside. It's all how we perceive life. It's all internal. So, I don't know if that's making any sense, but I guess what I'm saying is that I think that going through these really tough emotions and feeling them, and I'm speaking to myself when I'm saying this, will develop a much deeper, three-dimensional individual who will be able to interact with life in amazing ways.
Yeah. And we need to accept this is not a pissing contest, okay? It's not just say, hey, I've got a bigger trauma, I've got a harder life. Hey, come on, see, I have more anxiety than you. No, it doesn't work like that. No, you're so right. You're absolutely right in what you're saying. And we need to accept.
On top of that, two people could go through the same exact thing, and one person has no trauma and one person does. So
perfect.
It's person specific. So whatever that thing is you're going through that's so painful, know that someone else has gone through it. Know you're not broken, and you will get through it. You will.
Exactly. And the other thing to say is often enough, we perceive something because of things that happened to us in our younger lives. So there's very much core beliefs that are at some stage in your life that have been set down. And unfortunately, they're often very early in our first 7 years or so. So this is not something that often runs on the surface, but it is something that is hidden deep, deep, deep inside. And suddenly you respond like Pavlov's dog. As soon as the bell rings, you start to slobber because there's some trigger that gets you massively revved up and you have no bloody clue what it is.
Yeah.
And so I think that is where often the talking actually comes in, because you need to explore with someone who is further down the road. You need to explore things that have happened to you, and so that it allows you to maybe reframe things in your mind. But you were saying from the head up, so that is the head up work. But then you've got also the below the head, where actually a lot of things are hidden. There is a saying: the issues lie in the tissues. How has that happened? How has that manifested with you?
Yeah, it's so you call there's two different modalities: the top down and bottom up, right? So top down would be the talk therapy. And probably about 2-3 years ago, I felt that talk therapy was just regurgitating the same thing over and over and over, and just kind of spinning my wheels. And all the therapists were unbelievably helpful. I wouldn't be the person I am today. I wouldn't have been able to take the next step to try a different type of therapy if it wasn't for that, right? So, so I started to actually do trauma therapy, which is it's very experiential. And I when I first started doing it, it was very tough, because for me, I want like A, B, C, D, E, do this. You do A, and then when A is done, you do B. And I think that's a very male thing too. But instead, sit there. She's like, kind of close your eyes. What's coming up for you? And so you're just listening to your body, really. The other saying is body keeps the score, right? You're just listening to within to see what comes up. And then you start to move through all these, images come up, sayings came up, beliefs, and ultimately you're trying to feel the feelings that younger part of you was not able to feel when they were younger. And since that part wasn't able to feel those feelings, it's trapped in your body, creating anxiety, creating illness, all sorts of things. It's almost like you have one foot in the present and one foot in the past, and you're kind of nurturing that part of you. And it's amazing how it works. Again, I try not to measure it day by day. Like, was that a good session? So it's really kind of more of the direction that I'm moving towards now, to really get into the body more. I work out a lot. That's another way that I really can feel my body more. I think that's the other thing is I was probably so disassociated when I was younger, not even in my body really at times. So that's what I would say. Just moving more towards that sort of, therapy. But the book, there's so many things out there. And I think the other reason why I wrote the book is because I think that if you look at everything, and I'm sure you've done a lot of different work and modalities, they all kind of come back to just a handful of things, right? I mean, I can't tell you how many times you hear breath and breath work. And, like right now, I'm probably breathing more shallow than I normally do because I'm on camera and all this stuff. If you can just do that one thing and change the way you breathe, it could change so many things in your life.
Absolutely.
And then the observation, observe, which is the second part, which is, just understanding the data flow in your head. And that ties into core beliefs and all that stuff. It could be therapy. It could be journaling, where you're really understanding every day what's going through your head. And when you really look at it, there are things that you say to yourself that you would never say to anyone else. It's horrible. It's horrible. And I still do it. And then the last part would be where I talk about letting go. And it's really really when you're sitting, it could be, when you're sitting with these uncomfortable feelings, it could be, pushing yourself to do something. Like I've done a little bit of psychedelic therapy where you really are forced to let go, just let go in general. Like I think people who suffer from anxiety try to control everything. I know I do. It's like I try to control everything. And if I just let go a little bit more, and that section of the book is a little bit more esoteric, but you go to Buddhism, you could just look around it. They all kind of talk about the same thing, especially breath work.
I love it. And I see that in my daily practice every single day. I'm an anesthetist, and the people that are coming through, they're coming for their shoulder surgery and their spine surgery, whatever it is. And there's a certain subgroup of people, typically teachers, typically engineers, people who are always in control. They have to plan everything out. And then suddenly trauma happens, as in physical trauma, and they need a shoulder operation. And now they need to have an anesthetic where they completely let go of control. And that is the hardest thing for this subgroup of people. They're terrified. They're mortified. And these are the guys I spend quite significant time in my clinic with before we actually meet in theater to actually just explain things and establish rapport and trust. But this kind of anxiety that comes from this nearly pathological need for control, that is tremendous. Now, which subgroups also have that need for control? Children of alcoholics. Just drawing another parallel here to you, because you had to grow up much quicker, because you had to learn to look after your mum. You had to learn that promises are not being kept, that you have to do it all yourself. You're alone in doing it. All these kind of core beliefs that are laid down for so many children of alcoholics or a similar group of people. if I sort of listen to you, there are a lot of things that are sort of coming out from underneath the woodwork, and you just think, okay, that all fits very nicely together there.
Absolutely. I was just on an ACA meeting this morning,
Yeah.
call this morning,
Yeah.
so that's something that's another modality that I've utilized to have just a better understanding of growing up in that sort of environment. And it's funny you bring up the anesthesia. That happened to me. Like I went, and it wasn't too long ago that I had to go in and I had to get anesthesia, and I was like asking him a million questions, and and now that I look back, it was like the greatest sleep I ever had.
Isn't it?
It was almost like I was out and then I was up. It was like I didn't even,
Exactly.
It was crazy.
And that's exactly what I hear afterwards. Oh, doc, can I go back to sleep? That was the best sleep I've ever. I had one woman waking up and she was crying her eyes out. And I thought, oh my God, are you in pain? What's going on? She said, no,
Right.
It was the best sleep ever. Why did I have to wake up?
That's great. That's great.
And it just shows if we can achieve a similar sense of serenity with other means, that is such a powerful gift. But we only appreciate that gift if we have seen the darkness, if we have seen the anxiety.
Yeah.
If you've never experienced the anxiety, you don't know what serenity is really all about. So therefore, and I guess that's where I love your topic. Don't run away from your anxiety, embrace it. And
it's leaning into it, and I think also the other thing with there's control, but there's also what I've noticed is there's an overcomplication of things, right? Like there's got to be some other thing out there that's going to help me with this anxiety. Like I know probably 100 times the amount of information that I really need to know to deal with anxiety. Right. I mean, it's always going to be the next podcast, the next YouTube video. And look, again, I'm victim of it. And I think that's another reason I try to distill things and just say, look, it's simple, but not easy. It's not, like they have these things like these wearables now that you can, that are going to get rid of your anxiety. I've tried a couple of them. I'm like, I don't think you need to go that far. I think it's all within your person.
Exactly.
Really is. I mean, of course you can take supplements. There's things you want to get great sleep. You want to do things to supplement a calm, peaceful, invigorating life. But, there's always something else that is going to help the anxiety. And I just want to keep searching and make it all real complicated, and so I never get to the result that I'm looking for.
Love it. As a doctor, however, I would like to go one step back and just put that out there, that anxiety can also be a sign and symptom of something else being out of kilter in your body. So this anxiety in its own right does not necessarily need to be a pure psychological issue. Whilst we've talked about it mainly so far in this show, ultimately, if you think about your thyroid hormones being too high, well, that can give you a very nice anxiety. Any kind of tumor that is producing adrenaline or adrenaline, those kind of things. Well, guess what? You're going to feel that. And there are a number of things that potentially could be biological, that where your body is literally screaming out, hey, I need some help here. So I think if you recognize yourself in those kind of stories that we are sort of sharing here, then I think the very first step would be to go to your GP, to your family physician, not to get a drug, but to actually get checked out. Is there any underlying biological reason why you feel really weird? Is this kind of low-level depression and fatigue and yet anxiety? Is that actually to do because you're a woman, you're iron deficient, you're anemic, and you feel like shit? There could be as simple as that. And once we actually change your nutrition and maybe give you the supplements that you need to fill up or to stock up your depleted body, well, surprise, surprise, suddenly you feel 10 times better. So it often starts with very basic, simple things. The other thing, hydration. We often enough, most people run around dry like crisps. I see it again and again. That's why in theater, I give everyone a liter of fluid into the vein, because inevitably they are dry. Despite the fact that I tell them, look, drink up until 2 hours before the operation. We run around chronically dehydrated. Again, I'll be surprised that we see higher levels of anxiety. So here you go. So just talking.
No, that's a really good point. And I know that when I was younger, I did go to the doctor for numerous things. I think for me, it became, what I would say about that, I think it's really important, and you should rule out all that stuff because usually people with anxiety, I remember I thought I was having a heart attack. So usually people will end up at the hospital. I'm having a heart attack. They run a bunch of tests and they're like, you're just having a panic attack, and people are like, that's so. I think it's really important. What I will say is that when the doctor or 2 doctors or 3 doctors tell you the same thing and that you're fine, you need to stop going to the doctors, because that becomes the reason I'm saying that is I've had one of my flavors of anxiety was health anxiety, right? Like there's something wrong with me physically. And people would laugh because I'm really in shape. I take care of myself. I eat right. I hydrate. But I didn't go too far with it, but you just want the answer. Something has to be wrong with me physically, because there's no way I can be feeling this way on my own. So yes, go see your doctor. That's probably where we're going to end up, first of all, anyway. And then once you get the answers from them, don't believe them, because otherwise you'll create this whole thing where you just have to keep going to more and more doctors.
I love that. So basically rule out nasty things. And then if they say, it's just an anxiety attack, that's when your journey really starts. Because then you can start exploring what is actually really happening here. So you've ruled out the nasty things. Congratulations on that. You've ruled out the heart attack. You're quite right. 50% of the chest pain presentations to an emergency department are typically non-cardiac. So in other words, now you don't have a heart attack. This is anxiety, musculoskeletal pain, etc. So it's quite important.
50%? It's that high?
Yeah. So it's about that ballpark figure, yeah. So I think that is the important bit, though, to realize that there is that these are messages that your body is sending you, and we have not learned to stop and listen. We have not learned to actually figure out what is really going on. Only people like you with anxiety, people like who have gone through nasty depression, people who have had bloody near-death experiences, you need a big hammer on the head before you actually stop and think, okay. And some of us need 5 hammers before you finally listen. And so it's nice to actually create an environment where we raise the awareness of the power that you hold yourself by exploring things, how that works on your body. You were saying the breath work and there's such a power in breathing. And with that, what we do is basically, it's the diaphragm. There's just the dome-shaped muscle, so in our chest here. And every time you take a breath, you sort of push down and come back up. If we practice that, we're actually also massaging the parasympathetic, the vagus nerve. And that is the nerve that restores, that heals, that calms down. So by us simply actually using this technique that is so simple, we can make such a difference. How you were talking about sport, and did you have any experience with regards to trauma-focused yoga or trauma-focused exercises?
You mean like a modality for anxiety that involves yoga? I did a lot of Kundalini Yoga, which there's a lot of breath work and Kundalini Yoga. I never really had any, because there were periods people had experiences. They were saying Kundalini Yoga, you really have to be careful with, because there's this whole releasing this Kundalini energy. You probably have to read about it, but it can be psychologically harmful for people who don't know what they're doing. I mean, even just breath work. I mean, if you're doing really intense breath work, you can go into psychedelic places, right? So I would say Kundalini Yoga is probably really helpful. It's more, really more about the mind than the body, Kundalini Yoga.
Okay.
However, there's some poses that you hold for very long times.
Yeah.
I've done some Heller work, which is similar to Rolfing. I don't know if you know much about Rolfing, but it's very intense massage. And really the idea is to get your muscles back to kind of where they were when they were younger. Like it's like taking a pillow and fluffing a pillow. And as we talked about before, the issues in the tissues, if you're doing that really tough work and you're releasing this stuff, that could create a scenario where you might go through a phase of like not feeling great, but then eventually as that flushes out of your system. So there's unbelievable body workers and energy workers and all sorts of things like that out there. Is that what you were asking?
Yep. I mean, ultimately, there are so many modalities out there, and we are all finding ourselves right here, right now. We are ready for something, but often enough, we don't know what is out there. And therefore, I'm sort of touching upon a number of things here. Personally, I struggle a little bit with the kind of the crystals and the vibrations, etc. Part of me is still the sort of westernized doctor who thinks, yeah, what a hocus pocus. The other part of me has experienced healers, has actually worked with some very powerful people who did things with me, through me, where I have to say, okay, hang on, there is a bit more to that. So, and it's that kind of thing. So when I wanted to learn more about breath work, I became a breath coach. I'm now becoming a yoga teacher, a flexibility coach. Now I'm as flexible as a brick. Okay, let's be clear about that. But that does not mean to say that I cannot challenge my body. What I experience is quite a lot of release when I hold poses for a longer period of time. And what I realize is that as part of that trauma yoga, just flexible, well, I call it flexibility yoga for the sake of it. I'm actually pausing, I'm breathing, I'm letting go. Hey, sounds a bit familiar, isn't it? Was there not something that we exactly? So you can use a physical exercise to exactly achieve that. So it's just a different approach. Whilst you might not be ready to go for meditation, you might be ready to go actually for some physical exercise that achieves exactly the same outcome. So therefore, wherever you are in your life, I guess the point I'm trying to make is there is hope, there's help out there, and you just don't know how that teacher or that helper looks like. Some of them come in really funny shapes and forms, but there are ways forward. And I think that is where your book comes in, where you raise your awareness, where you raise the knowledge of people out there. That's where your passion comes in, and that's a fantastic.
Yeah, it's one step forward. I mean, there's a lot of patience involved too, because I think initially I wanted everything to go away immediately, and that just doesn't work that way because life wants me to learn something, right?
Yeah.
If I were to go through that and be done with it in 10 minutes, I wouldn't have learned anything, and I wouldn't have started to take this journey to explore deep within, right? It's funny, we were talking about healers. There's a bunch of Maori healers. I mean, I know there's one in LA that my wife saw, and they're very powerful individuals. And so I'm sure, I don't know if you've ever experienced that, and I don't know what sort of modalities they practice, but if you can find these things, all are I think add-ons, right? They can help, they can assist. But ultimately, we're with ourselves 23 hours a day, right? For the most part, or 23, 24. We're with each other 24/7, right? And so
I was about to say, what do you do the other hour?
Yeah, you can cut that out. But so in talking about meditation, like we can meditate on the mat, but then what do we do with the 23 hours? When we go out into the world, do we take that mindset out there? So I think all these things are fantastic. Again, just be careful not to overcomplicate things. And you really have to find out what works for you. You were talking about working out or doing the yoga poses. Yes. And you're also sitting with the uncomfortable feelings, right?
Absolutely.
You're longer periods of time. I bought I built this kind of I have a cold plunge at my house, and, I know it's the rage now, but you know what, for people who suffer with anxiety, to sit in that, my body goes into fight or flight, same thing that happens when you have a panic attack or high levels of anxiety. And I just sit there and I slow down my breath while I'm sitting in this cold water. In that 3 minutes, I can take that into the world, and I'm going to be able to be more resilient because of that. Right.
Absolutely.
So if you have that mindset with these things you're doing, and that's why I say, if you lean in, go a little farther than you think you can, because next time you'll be able to go a little farther and a little farther. And the body and the mind are flexible, man. Even as you get older. I know people say you can't teach old dogs new tricks. Well, humans you can. So that's my belief.
Absolutely true. But also the other thing that we need to say is all your approaches there are actually about taking action. We talked about the hydration. We talked about the sleep. We talked about the nutrition. You took action. You made small changes, but in a consistent way throughout your whole day. And so therefore, but if someone who is taking action is no longer the passive victim, so you're no longer paralyzed by your anxiety, but you're actually taking control back in your life. And that is so beautiful. I think that is another key message and a thing that puts a smile on my face. When I say, okay, this morning I actually got up, had a shower. I then, I rushed actually into an interview, but it's okay. In between, I made sure I eat something. I hydrate. I'm getting lots of enthusiasm here. I know that I've fed my soul today, but I know I haven't fed my body yet, in the sense of I haven't given him some exercise, some oxygen, some stretching, all those kind of things that it needs. So I'm looking forward to doing that later on in my day. So I'm taking control back from the anxiety. And should a panic attack come, then I will sit down and do some experiencing first. I see it as a message or as a messenger from the universe, from my body, to tell me, hey, you fucked up. Something is not right. Let's figure out what that is. And I think this is a powerful thing. This is, again, I'm a recipient here, not a victim. I'm changing the story. I'm writing a different ending for the next chapter. I think that is important. You guys are in control out there. And Chris, you're manifesting that. You are modeling that. That's what your book is about. And that's amazing. That's where your filmmaking is about. I mean, where do you go? I know you're a filmmaker. Is that some work that you're addressing in due course, or what will happen with you? Who's the new Chris who will develop in 2024?
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I'm going to say I don't know. Like, that's one thing I never felt comfortable saying before. I felt like if I didn't know, well, who knows then? And I'm starting to say that more often now, because it's every day. I just try to show up every day, and like you were saying, take a shower. Like you said, you took a shower. Like, some people, that's a huge thing, just taking a shower. Like for some people with anxiety, they have it horrible and they can't leave their room or their bedroom or whatever. You just do one thing, it will lead to other things. And I just want to bring up the medication again really quickly, because I think that in this world we live in now, my belief or my judgment is that everyone wants the quick fix, right? Or they just want everything quickly, including myself. I mean, you just want the quick fix, and medication sometimes can look like that quick fix. And I think that that doing, like you were saying, doing these, sometimes it's easier to do that than to say, I got to get up, I got to work out, I got to do this. Those are the only things that are going to make me feel better. It just seems more overwhelming for that person. But again, I think if people just give it a shot and just do one thing and know they're not broken, and doing that inner exploration, their life will change. Their life will change. Because I'm doing it. I'm not going to say I did it, because I think that anxiety lives in somehow, still lives in me.
Yeah.
And it will always live in me. It's just how I relate to it, right? My relationship with it is different now. And that's why I call it a dance. The dance is, I don't see it as this dark, ugly thing anymore. I see it as, that's the hand I was dealt with. And there's a lot of, like you were saying before, if I didn't experience that terror, I wouldn't be able to experience probably the joy that I experience in my life, right? It's the flip side of the coin. The ability for you to feel deep pain gives you the ability to feel exaltation and joy, right? And so, yeah, it's a warrior's path. I think that I think the generation is up for it. I do. I mean, I see how they're standing up to the things that are happening in the world. Well, if they could stand up like they do like that for the things that are happening internally, I think they'll be good.
I couldn't agree more. I could not agree more. Chris, you're an amazing man. It's wonderful to talk to you. If people want to know more about you, where can they find you?
They could go to my website, which is just my name, ChristopherGlatis.com. And I probably haven't updated in a while, but there's all my projects are on there. The book is on there. Obviously they can go to Amazon. That's probably the big gorilla that has, they can go there and get the book. I will say that my audio, I know a lot of people are into audiobooks, and that's going to be released probably in the first of next year. So I'm really excited about that, because I just know people just love just listening to books and not having to, like, while they're walking around, instead of having to, read a book. So I'm excited about that. Yeah, those are the best places. And then Instagram, I just started to kind of roll out on Instagram, talk about the book. I got clips from podcasts and stuff like that. So those are probably the best.
Cool. Guys, look down there into the description of the YouTube video and of the podcast, because all of Chris's links are down there. Whilst you're down there, press the like and subscribe button. And whilst you're there, you might think, well, what was really cool about that? And put it into the comments there, and so that Chris and I know where we got it right, or maybe learn from you. There might be something that you have experienced and that we didn't touch upon. So if you can make this world a better place by sharing that snippet of information or that nugget of gold, I want to hear about it. Cool. Chris, you're an amazing man. Thank you so much for being a guest on my show. You certainly made me think. You certainly made me just re-examine some of my own thoughts, and you strengthened some of my resolve that actually, by doing what I'm doing, I'm on the right way. Sometimes there's the imposter syndrome. Sometimes there are these other syndromes where you think, who am I to actually say that this is the right way? So thank you. You made my day for actually just make me keep going. For that, I'm ever so grateful to you.
Yeah, well, thank you. This is really wonderful. I love talking about this and helping people any way I can. And I think that you're doing a wonderful thing. You were talking earlier on about New Zealand and the male population there, and you're showing that can be different. And doing this out of the love for informing people. So keep doing what you're doing.
Same to you, brother. Cool. And you guys out there, look after yourself and live with passion. Bye.
I never give up. I never give up. I never give up. Turn around.